Hey, IDC, I'm Christy Britton, and I have the pleasure of talking to Miss Kim Humphrey today. And Kim is such a treasure to our local body, and I'm just thrilled to get to see her face in person virtually,
Yes.
the best we can. It's been too long since I've had a Kim Humphrey hug. Kim's going to talk to us today about books that have shaped her. And so, Kim, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Okay. Hey, Christy. It's so good to see you. And you're right. I wish I could get a Christy hug right now, but we can't, and we have to be okay with it. So my name is Kim Humphrey, and I am married to Jay Humphrey, and we have been at IDC about 8 years. I think that's right. We came in the spring of 2012.
And what's your job?
I work at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, and I'm an administrative assistant for the president's office.
And you got a bunch of grandkids.
I have a bunch of grandkids, yes. We have 2 married children, and we have 8 grandchildren, and we love every moment of it.
I bet. All right, let's talk about books. Now, Kim is going to share with us 3 books, and I am very curious to know what her 3 books are that have shaped her. So let's just pick one. Like, what's your first one we're going to talk about? Just tell us a little bit, like summarize the book for us.
Yeah. Okay. The first one I'm going to talk about is Peacemaker by Ken Sandy, and I don't know if you could see that. That might have been a little blurry.
Can you show it again? Okay.
Can you see it? Is it backwards? It looks backwards to me.
That's fine.
So I read that book in 2012, and I started it in the fall. I was going through a very, very difficult time in my life of personal hurt and family crisis. And so I didn't know what to do with it. And I had never really gone through anything like this before that affected me so personally and so deeply. And so through great counsel, I was recommended to read this book, and I did. And I'm so, so grateful I did. And it is about a peacemaker, being a peacemaker, and what that looks like biblically. I am not a conflict-oriented person. I run from conflict. I do everything I can to avoid being involved in conflict. And sometimes conflict just seeks you out and you can't run from it. So I'm just going to give a couple of brief highlights from this book. It impacted me powerfully to this day, currently still. And I keep it very handy when I'm doing things that I need to read and just have some encouragement on and things such as that. But one of the things that this really spoke to me about was that Jesus desires unity among believers. And even in believers, there can be discord and things that don't reflect the image of Christ. And so that is not what he desires for us. And that he loves, he commands us to love people even when we don't want to. And that's where I was. I didn't want to love. I was very hurt, and I just did not want to love during this time that I was in. And so reading this showed me that I was dealing with pride on my own side, and I needed to just get to the root of that pride and allow Christ to come in and heal me first, and then give me the ability to be a peacemaker and to forgive. And that was probably my biggest takeaway from this, was that who am I to not to forgive when Christ forgave me? And so that was what spoke volumes to me about this book, realizing that he desires us to be at peace with our fellow believers, and he wants us to pursue that. And sometimes it's hard. We don't have to do easy things all the time. It's, life is not easy all the time. But in the end of that, it's pointing to him, and it points to Christ in all of the ways that we are pursuing peace. And for me, realizing that he has forgiven me for things, and I'm no better than than the Lord. And so I need to follow his example, and I need to offer forgiveness as well.
Great advice. Great book.
Yes, so good.
Right.
I highly recommend it.
What's number 2 on your list?
Okay, number 2 is, ladies, you're familiar with this, Respectable Sins. I read this. I don't remember when the first time was when we did it at IDC. So, Christy, do you remember? I can't remember.
Like 5 years.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, so the first time we did the book club, I loved it. And so I was reading it this last time when we did the book club too, and I enjoyed it just as much. And it brought just so many new things out to me. I have put it down. I'm finding it a little bit difficult to concentrate on reading things these days. So I have put this down. But there were definitely some takeaways from this. This is like confession right now, but I have always been a rule follower. And so, when you're a rule follower, you don't necessarily think about committing these big sins because, you're not supposed to. And so I was very intrigued from the very moment I opened up this book. And one of the things says that the Lord is dishonored and displeased by our anxiety, unthankfulness, frustration, selfishness, impatience, and discontentment, as he is by the overt sins we're so proud to avoid. Well, hello, Kim Humphrey. So yes, okay, I'll read this book. I don't want to, but I'll read it. And so definitely those are things that I struggle with almost every day, that I'm not proud of, and that I'm not, it doesn't make me feel good to be frustrated at Jay for something that he would have no reason to know that I'm frustrated at him about, or to be selfish with my time, and just to be impatient. Oh my gracious. Just those little things. And so that was one of that just going and realizing that those small things that we can do on a day-to-day basis are, in the sight of the Lord, they're sins. And so when we recognize them, when I recognize that those actions that I'm exhibiting are sins, then that steps on my toes and brings conviction to my heart. So whenever we decide to do this book again, let's do it.
Yeah, that book is brutal, but so good. It's when I found out we were doing it for the second time, I felt like I had to do warm up, work myself up to read it again, because it's a lot. Good.
It is. It is. And it's a good reminder. It's something that for me, I read it, I wrote in it, all the kinds of things. And I was very looking forward to pulling it back out, because it had been a long time, and just seeing what I picked out different this time than what, where I was when I was reading it the very first time. It was very eye-opening again.
Yeah. Okay. What's number 3?
Okay. Number 3, I just read last year, and it is Suffering by Paul David Tripp. I don't know if you've seen this. I don't know who has read this, yes. But it came into our office, and so I quickly just whisked it away to my house. So this book I don't even own. I had to borrow it again today, but I filled up a notepad with notes from this book. And again, I was going through a very hard time, and due to some unforeseen home circumstances that we were trying to get through, and I was not in a great place mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And so I just really started seeking the Lord and how I needed to heal myself through him, and just what I need to do. And this book just came across, and there were 3 things that ran together during that time period that I was reading and studying and things such as that. But this book was huge, and I very often refer to the notes that I wrote in it. I'm not going to go to that today, but I did get the book in time to just scan a couple of things. But one of my biggest takeaways from this was that, oftentimes I have thought of people that suffer as those that are going through chronic illness or a death in the family or things such as that. But that is suffering. But everybody goes through suffering of things in life, because we are human and we're in this fallen world. And so realizing that because I was in a bad way trying to recover from a mishap in our home, I was still suffering, and it was okay to suffer and to recognize that, oh, I'm not okay, I'm not okay with it. We're just going to push through. No, I was really grieving and suffering, and I didn't even know it, because in my mind that was just a thing. It was a material thing that could be fixed. And so the struggle for me was recognizing that even though it is a material thing, it's okay to suffer through that loss of what I was going through. And so just really, really quick on this, he said that we all suffer, but we don't suffer the same way. And that's so true. That's what really just jumped out at me. And this was in the beginning of the book. So that was very helpful for me to, just keep pushing in. But he says, because our suffering is shaped by what we carry into the difficulties that come our way. And through reading this book and just doing a lot of soul searching and digging into the scripture about suffering and things such as that, I actually went on a personal journey way back to 1998. And so through that, I have been being healed through that process of walking through some very difficult things in our family, in our life, from that time point that had been suppressed. And just reading this made me realize, but it's okay to talk about them. You don't have to suppress it and go on to the next thing. I realized very much that I was in survival mode, and it's that time and up to this when I started reading this book. And the Lord really doesn't intend for us to be in survival mode only. He wants us to live our life for Him. And so people, if you're suffering, it's okay. You can share it. You can talk about it. You can call it what it is. It's hard, and it's not fun. But as I think about these 3 books, they're all kind of like, they're kind of hard and heavy. But I'm super, super grateful for them. And then the last thing that I'm going to share about this book is that suffering is spiritual warfare. And who would have ever thought that suffering is indeed spiritual warfare? But it is. And how we walk through that warfare determines our outcome as we go through our suffering. And do we let our bend go towards the Lord and His sustenance and carrying us through the suffering, or are we going to figure it out on ourselves, amongst ourselves, in security of my own self, and I don't want to share it with anybody. So again, as we're going through this time here, and there's lots of suffering that people are going through even right now, but we don't have to go through it by ourselves, and He does not intend for us to. And so that was the great thing, was that recognizing that I was suffering, but it was different than somebody else's suffering. And it's okay that I was suffering and that I will suffer again, because just because we suffer one time doesn't mean we won't suffer again. So hopefully we can learn through those processes and recognize, even when we see in other people that they are going through hard times, and that, my prayer and my takeaway from that season of me reading that and going through this myself is that I have become more aware of other people and their hurts and their struggles, and taking my eyes off of myself and just listening to the Lord when He sends me a name of somebody to reach out to. So just being aware that, they might not have this problem or situation or whatever, but it's suffering to them, whatever it might be.
Yeah. I think that book helped give voice to things that I couldn't voice as a sufferer, and also helped me to receive words I needed to hear in suffering. It was very good. I mean, he's a wonderful author anyway.
Yes.
That book, it was really, really good. I
Yes.
love that you're deep reading. Like, I love it. No fluff over here.
It's hard, but it's so good. It's so beneficial. And I have enjoyed, when you asked me about, to do this, of course, the first one that popped in my mind was Respectable Sins, because it was the most recent. But then after you gave me a day to think about it, I was like, oh no, I've got these others that are just as impactful to my life. And they're all just very much self-reflecting, I think, but taking it to the Lord. and how he would have me, us, anyone to walk through what we're going through, because he's there for us, and he's our comforter, and he's our forgiver. He restores us in many things that we go to, but he also convicts us in the respectable sins that we do. So.
A little bit. Thank you so much. I have loved knowing the books that have shaped you, and I can't wait to, I haven't read one of them, so I'm excited to jump into that. IDCers, if you haven't read these books, I hope you'll give them a try. Kim,
Yes.
I love you. It was so good to see you, and that's all for now, IDC. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, ladies and men.